I got one last point to make about all of this atheism as a default position debacle.
I said I'd never deal with this guy again, but damn it, this is a subject about which I care, so let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here. So this is YouTuber Bruce Shepard, also known as Ravenwolf, also known as, well, I don't even know anymore. He's changed his identity enough times to think he might be Jimmy Hoffa. And he has a few things to say about atheism and agnosticism, and damn it, there's been a debacle that I'm not part of. So let's dive in face first.
Lack of belief means without belief, right? How do you come up with this term that it means without knowing?
We don't. Those are two completely different, separate concepts.
How is lack of belief converted to lack of knowledge?
Well, again, it's not. In fact, you've got it completely ass backwards. Some people don't believe because they lack enough knowledge to definitively say that something is so. So it is, in fact, lack of belief because of lack of knowledge.
Without belief does not mean without knowledge of. So you can't play that ignorance role.
Well, first of all, it's not a role we're playing. But next of all, I can actually claim ignorance. If there is information about the existence of your God out there, I don't have it. As much as it's a loaded term that gets people's hackles up, I can freely claim ignorance on this particular subject. And it's that ignorance that causes my lack of belief.
You know, it's bad enough that you want to change the definition of atheist to suit your own perspective of what you're labeling yourself.
Now, wait a minute. What are we actually discussing here? I mean, are we going to argue about the label for certain concepts? Because what I'm hearing you say is that you want atheism to mean something fairly narrow, while the rest of us have a much more inclusive definition. Now, I'm almost tempted to concede the argument to you and let you have the word atheism. But that means that the rest of us need another word, so that we can discuss the concept we're talking about. The concept of the number of gods you believe in is 0, therefore you're what? Because I don't want to argue about the term anymore. I want to discuss a certain concept, and if we can't use the word atheist for that, we need another one.
These types of atheists are playing this game because they don't want to be accountable to having to be confronted about making a claim that God doesn't exist.
Defining other people's motivations for them.
To peddling.
And if we're not making a claim that God doesn't exist, why should we be confronted with it?
Say, well, you have to pretty much know everything to say that there's no evidence for God at all.
But we're not saying that. What we're saying is that any evidence that has been presented to us has been circumstantial, subjective, or full of confirmation bias, and thus your claim that a God exists is flimsy at best.
Now that then they turn around and say, well, we just don't know. And that's where we have a lack of belief.
Now hold on just a second, because right now you're getting it correct. That actually is the position of most atheists, that a lack of knowledge leads to a lack of belief. But if you're getting it correct now, then why is it that beforehand you said this?
Without belief does not mean without knowledge of.
So what gives? Are you just confused, or are you deliberately misrepresenting our position? Which is it?
Since a baby doesn't know at birth, that means they're atheists at birth. No. Lack of belief does not mean that you do not know.
A baby is not born believing in a God. The number of gods a baby believes in is 0 because they've never heard of God. So if a baby believes in 0 gods, and I believe in 0 gods, a baby and I are in the same category of people who believe in 0 gods. Now, if you don't want the word atheist to mean that, then give me another one, because that's what I want to discuss. In fact, what I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, is an attempt to control the debate. What you're saying, essentially, or at least what I'm hearing you say, is here's what atheism means. Now, atheists, defend that. That's a straw man argument, and I'm not going to play along.
Any word that has a suffix of ist or ism applied to it cannot be a default position, first off.
And here we go again, quibbling over terminology. The terms do not define the debate. The terms do not define the concept. Now, I freely admit I'd like to keep using the definition of atheism I've been using, but that's not actually as important as discussing the relevant issue, which seems to be something you're disinclined to do because you'd rather bitch over definitions.
Well, first off, I'm going to explain why. Because these things are labels of a belief or a shared belief, okay? Which means that you are required, a person that has these labels, they are required to have knowledge and understanding about their belief.
And you would be correct if it weren't for two little details. First of all, if you look up ism in the dictionary, you'll find that one of the definitions is indicating a state or condition. In other words, you don't necessarily have to have deliberately taken a position to have an ism attached to you. Next of all, the prefix a, when put at the front of a word, negates it. When something is asymptomatic, it means it doesn't have symptoms. When something is amoral, it means it doesn't have morality. When something is asymmetrical, it means it doesn't have symmetry. So what do you think an atheist is?
In order for you to lack a belief, you would at least have to know something about what you're lacking belief in.
Well, once again, we're getting hung up on terminology. Because when people say lack of belief, what they mean is an absence of belief, that belief is not present, that of all the things you don't have, belief is on that list for any reason. If this is not what you mean when you say lack of belief, then find another way for us to express this concept so we can discuss our actual position. Because when it comes to discussing your straw man definition of lack of belief, not gonna happen.
I'll tell you what. All babies are ignorant. That's just it.
Agreed. Babies are ignorant. But explain to me exactly how you can believe in something if you've never heard of it. And if you can't, what does that make you?
At birth, every baby on this planet is ignorant of anything that is a belief or a shared belief that has a label that has a suffix of ist or ism on it.
All right, let's try to follow this logical chain to what should be its obvious conclusion. If you're born with no knowledge of the God concept and thus no belief in God, one thing you are definitely not is a theist. You are not part of theism. And how do we indicate that? Well, we attach the prefix a onto the word theism. Atheism, without theism. You see, atheism is not a shared belief the way theism is. In fact, what it is the absence of the shared belief of theism. That's it. If there were no theists, then everybody would be an atheist because we're not theists. You see, when we came up with words, we did it in order to be able to communicate with people so that everyone understood each other. We use words to convey concepts or indicate objects. That's how we have a rational discussion. Now, if you don't want to use the word atheist to mean someone who's not a theist for any reason, then we need another word to be able to discuss that concept, because otherwise, how can we communicate with each other?
And personally, I think that it's because that they can't win a debate. They want it so bad.
Quite frankly, it sounds like the other way around. Because you're trying to define our position for us, and then insist that we defend that, instead of actually having a discussion about the position we really do hold. Now, can you have that debate, or are you going to storm off and call us liars? Which side sounds like they can't actually defend their position?
Well, it would make you an atheist if you still lack belief in God, but it would make you an ignorant atheist if you lack knowledge of God.
Well, you're not wrong exactly, but we prefer the term agnostic atheist because, well, ignorant is kind of a loaded term, kind of insulting. But agnostic is agnosis, without knowledge. There you go, agnostic atheist.
It's amazing if these people think that they're smarter than religious people.
Aha, have we reached the crux of the issue? Sounds like someone thinks his intelligence has been impugned. You know, you wouldn't be quite so butthurt if your panties weren't in such a wad.
I should have been a psychiatrist.
Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.